to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. This is our Friday early morning edition. It is the start today of the College World Series for baseball. Obviously, the Arkansas Razorbacks back in the College World Series. Be the fourth and final game. There are 8 teams starting on Saturday. I think first pitch is around 6 p.m. Central Time. So a couple of games today. Arkansas actually won't play till tomorrow, but the College World Series, many of you, if not all of you, will be really intently dialed into that, as will I, as the Diamond Hogs look to get over the hump and get that first national championship. They've been in 2 title games in the history of the school, or title series. Cal State Fullerton back in the 70s, and that golden Final Four for basketball, that stretch of that 79, I believe it was, for baseball, and Arkansas had just been off a Final Four in basketball. And then just a few years ago, we know how that ended. So Arkansas's got a chance to play its way into the championship series, best out of 3. And you hope they get that far, and then you hope they go ahead and like I said, seal it up and bring back that banner. All right, but we're here to talk about basketball. So for those with baseball in your mind, I want to tip the hat, get this out of the way early, and then we'll focus again later on other things today. Of course, I'll be working behind the scenes to continue to try to get secure more information about the schedule, about the roster, recruiting, which picked up for high school class of 2026 in the last couple of days, being that it was a live eval period specifically set aside for the NBPA Top 100 camp in South Carolina. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here at the end. But let's start with the big news yesterday. We finally got a public commitment announcement. There have been a couple of names circulating. One of those we've talked about for about around a week now. Always working, Kevin. Well, I try. That's what we're supposed to be doing. If we're coming on here to talk, we need to do the work so we have something to talk about. But thank you for the comment. And so Igor Ryzhov is the name that's been out there for about a week. In fact, I think it was a week ago today that really started picking up steam in terms of what Arkansas's plans might be. Yet it was a name that really popped up on the radar kind of late on Wednesday, that turned out less than 24 hours later was making a public commitment announcement via Jonathan Givony of Draft Express, ESPN. And that was Elmir Javich, 6'11", 265 center. Yesterday's segment, around this time, before the commitment announcement was made, we mentioned that we were told it would have either happened the previous night, which it didn't, or sometime during the day on Thursday, which it did. And I was very clear. I was very clear about the fact that I saw him as a back-end addition, not really slated as a top 2 rotation kind of player, but kind of back-end, maybe more development, maybe someone that could be used in an emergency, that kind of thing. So we talked about that. I brought up the fact that I didn't see this as an either or with Ryzhov, because I reported the day before, so that would have been Wednesday's segment, that Ryzhov, there might be some snags with him, some complications with him being able to make it to Arkansas, and it may take a while, specifically visa issues, I'm told. But I did not see one as a replacement for the other. In other words, I see Ryzhov, who we've talked a lot about, the 6'11" forward center out of Russia. I see him as actual frontline depth for your 2 deep rotation. Initially intended as a backup to Trevor Brazile at the 4 spot, but versatile enough to help at the 5 and give you a 4-man, depth rotation when you look at that front line 4s and 5s. I do not see, again, Javich as that kind of guy. I think he's more back end of the roster, more developmental again, that kind of thing. And so yesterday, I just didn't spend a whole lot of time on this talking point, but I said, I don't see any reason why, just because you got this commitment announcement, that you're done. That if you're still efforting a true depth piece to get from an 8, solid 2 deep to 9. And again, we're not quite sure where a guy like Isaiah Seeley, who, if you do get to 9 with a Ryzhov or somebody else, not Javich, where if Seeley's your 10th guy, or is he maybe your 9th guy and the front line help plays because you need a 4th player there, and you're going to at some point due to foul trouble, that or a combination of illness or injury that he'd have to play as well. But the point is that this addition yesterday again, it gets Arkansas to 13 players. Technically on the roster, they can go to 15. We know they're going to backfill beyond the top two rotation. And at minimum, a guy like Seeley is someone you can use as maybe would be Kareem Artal. And we'll see about Jovic. But again, I think he's kind of at the end of those three that I just mentioned. Outside the top, what is an 8 right now. And if you continue to pursue Ryzhov, which is going to be my intel here in a little bit, then that's what that would look like. So if you add another player after yesterday's announcement, that would get you to 14 with one more to go. And again, I think you're only going to really pursue one true depth piece when you look at rotation. And so if there are two more to round it out, technically to get to 15, then it would probably be potentially one to complete your rotation look and another one to be kind of help and practice and be that back end emergency, or someone that's maybe there to redshirt, go through development, and we'll see what plan is in place for Jovic. There was one, we'll call him an insider, and this guy, I haven't seen his name before, but he suggested yesterday on social media that this addition for Arkansas might even be of Jovic, might even be a favor to a powerful agent in the Balkans, Misko, Raznanovich. And he mentioned this agent by name as being a powerful agent of players in that region, and that this addition might even be like a favor, or trying to get in good graces. So who knows if that's accurate? There's a lot of things going around about Arkansas adding a back end piece, but that's what this is. Again, that's how I see it. I don't see, again, for those, just because I want to be clear about what I think Arkansas is getting. It doesn't mean that someone else doesn't have a different take on it. I'm not as plugged in with the international guys, but I did enough research. I even said it yesterday. I went kind of through it yesterday that, again, I don't see it as part of your rotation plans. All right. So we got that out of the way. So what is the intel on Ryzhov? Simply this. I had multiple sources saying that it looks to them like it's trending toward and heading toward an Arkansas commitment. The staff had said, yeah, be on the lookout for something soon. Well, Jovic checks that box in a sense, but also there's enough sources on this where I still trust it, even though I haven't confirmed any procedural paperwork on Ryzhov on the back end like we typically do. And though I don't have on my end any word of a private silent commitment, just waiting to go public, I've trusted the source information enough to believe there's enough smoke here to believe that this is probably trending to Arkansas. We've never said this is a firm commitment, but that's what we've said. So at least two of those sources after this commitment yesterday, what I followed up with, hey, where do things stand right now? It continues to be, this may take a while. There are complications, and the visa seems to be the big part of that. But from what they are still getting, this is still on a pathway for Ryzhov to be a Razorback. So, at some point, I guess it could be that it takes a really long time, or not as long as we think, or it gets to a point where both parties have to decide to move on. Arkansas has been kicking the tires at minimum on other players. That's not anything new. We've said that for at least 2 weeks before we advanced as far as we did with the specific names of actual attachment to Arkansas with Ryzhov and then Jovic, which happened, that happened within a blink of an eye on that last one. I had not heard his name before. Learned of that on Wednesday. I disclosed that little nugget yesterday during yesterday's segment when we talked about maybe the impending commitment, which it did happen. And so I was asked about a couple of those names. So Ryzhov, just to recap, the 6'11" forward center out of Russia, athletic guy, rim hunting guy, and I think I either said it on one of my radio segments or maybe it was Pig Trail Nation, but in the last few days we've been talking about him. I actually gave a minutes projection for him, and I said somewhere between 12 to 15 minutes a game is what I would envision for Ryzhov. Again, a secondary forward that can help at the 5, and really, guys like Malik Ewan, Nick Pringle, Trevor Brazil are going to be your top 3. and they're going to get the bulk of your minutes on the front line. And so whoever they add, if it's a guy like Ryzhov, that's probably what the minutes allocation would, kind of be a ceiling maybe on an average would be 15, and maybe as few as 10. But I had him in the 12 to 15 range. But I was asked about a couple other players that could also maybe fit the bill for a playable depth piece that's in your rotation on Hogville yesterday. The couple of names that one of our posters put up there, and I just responded to it because I have been hearing these names, talking with folks on the back end about these, not specifically necessarily tied to Arkansas, but potentially that something like that might make sense. And one of those is a 6'10", 250-pound center, and I'm going to butcher the first name, so I'm just going to spell it Ege. That sounds like how hard can that be, but I think that's Turkish and originated from Turkey, and I think the pronunciation is Ege, not Eg, which is what my inclination would be to say. And the last name, Demir, 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 Demir. But a 6'10", 250-pound athletic center will turn 21 in late August. And that's the name is Turkish, and I think he's also originally Nigerian, but he's been playing in the Turkey BSL League and averaging just over 5 points, 5 rebounds, and just over a block shot per game, shooting nearly 60% from the field. Now, he's a guy that committed originally, and I don't know if he signed a letter of intent. I don't know if it got that far, but he committed to UCLA in 2022, and he was not able to get all his ducks in a row to enable him to do that. So he's not played college basketball. So that was roughly 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when that took place. And so I'm told with him, there's multiple high majors that are after him. It sounds like maybe there's been a resolution to whatever the snags were holding him up. And so keep an eye on him in terms of if Arkansas and Ryzhov are not going to happen or that won't pan out. But if there are multiple high majors efforting on this Demir player, that means that someone else could be getting closer to locking that up, and you may not have time to play the waiting game. So I was asked about him, and this is what I know. This is what I found out. But in 30 games playing in that Turkish Pro League, let's see. He would help our. Now I don't know if you can just consider him versatile enough to be a forward center. I had a note there about that. I couldn't read it. I need to be a little better with the handwriting late at night. But he's somebody that would help you on the front line depth. Is he someone that would slot in right at the 4, in place of Brazil? That I don't know. If I don't know how well that would work. With Ryzhov, it seems easier to identify that works. With this guy, maybe it does. Maybe it'd be just fine. And so I had a thought on that my chicken scratch yesterday. I'm not reading that very well. All right, the other player, here's another name I was asked about. Basamba Diop, 6'11", out of Senegal, 20 years old. And he's initially started with Real Madrid in Spain. And he's been with Gran Canaria the last couple of seasons. And so another international player. And one of the things I was told by multiple sources when I checked on him was there are academic things there that likely makes him a long shot to be able to get those cleared up and be prepared and ready to actually be able to attend a college in the United States, Division I or whatever levels. The way it was framed to me was that there's academic stuff there that might prohibit that. But I was asked about it. And again, this is a center. And so you would have definitely a third option at the 5 spot. Again, I don't know enough about Demir and Diop to say that they would be on the court comfortably with a center. And Brazil's a guy that stretches the floor. We know that he's a stretch 4 who can help at the 5. And I see Ryzhov as a guy that's not going to shoot from 3, but the things he brings to the court seems to make him a more comfortable fit at the 4 and then help at the 5 as well. These two, again, I repeat, not so sure about that. However, the folks I talked to about these guys say, just from a ceiling and an overall what they bring to the table, they'd probably be a bit of an upgrade to a guy like Ryzhov. So, not trying to put you down a path necessarily of anyone. Out of the two, based on what I was told, Demir, the first name I mentioned, would make more sense for Arkansas. And even one of the sources I talked to thought among the high major schools in a conversation he had, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, he thought Arkansas's name was mentioned with a group of high major schools, but he didn't know enough from that. He was going to follow up. I don't have a follow up on that today, maybe by tomorrow when we come on, to know how serious that was, or if it was just a passing thing, or if Arkansas is trying to dig in there. But I don't see Arkansas trying to add to get to 15 and two more to go, two true depth pieces. I just don't see them adding that many in terms of plan for the 2 deep rotation. I think just one and then maybe another back end piece. And so these two names I mentioned would be in the similar light of a Ryzhov, expecting to be some kind of, have a role in your 2 deep. So again, to me, until it changes and shifts away from Ryzhov, that's who I'm focused on. I think that's where it still is for Arkansas. It's not to say that it gets resolved and that we ever see anything see the light of day, or we could hear it today, because there's enough smoke there to believe that there's been a real pursuit there, however the outcome becomes for that. And then we just keep an eye on these other two names and others. There are other international players that, as we hit a deadline here for some to withdraw from the NBA draft, and some other stuff where we might see other things emerge. Even though it seems late in the game, Calipari's added players much later than mid-June, so historically. And so we just, again, are dialed in on those things, and we'll continue to bring names as we get them. But that is 17 minutes in. That's the report today regarding that stuff. One thing I will say as we wrap and move on to something else here, just a bit of scheduling update. We've talked about the fact that Louisville is going to play at Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas will host that ACC-SEC Challenge game. I think that came out a couple of days ago, and then we talked about that during our segment yesterday. And just one little tidbit, yesterday during the day, it was announced that game will be played on December 3rd. And so that's a Wednesday. So I think the game at Miami, the ACC-SEC Challenge a year ago, was also on December 3rd. So effectively the same playing date. And we speculated, the first year when they played hosted Duke and Bud Walton in that challenge, the first year of the challenge, that was a late November game. And Arkansas is playing in late November. The 27th is Thanksgiving Day. That's Duke. That's Chicago. So this is interesting because this is probably your next game. I don't see Arkansas squeezing in another playing date, Thanksgiving weekend, a holiday, and then squeezing another game between that and December 3rd. That's about a week apart. And you're going to have 2 ACC opponents. And you're probably, if you looked at the ACC last year, I mentioned this yesterday when we talked about the fact that Louisville would be the opponent. I said, last year that was probably the second best team in that league, arguably was behind Duke. And, when you looked at Rothstein's rankings, Duke preseason coming in at 9, that's the rankings I'm using now. But Rothstein also had Louisville preseason 17th. So we mentioned that yesterday, but those are probably the top 2 teams, at least projected coming into the season in the ACC. And you're going to get them on back-to-back playing dates is how that looks. And so, when I consider that, I really think that, Arkansas can really make a statement. The ACC wasn't very good last year. We know Duke was a Final Four team. They were great all year. And Louisville, the first year under Pat Kelsey, very impressive first season, a team that was ranked a lot and was an NCAA tournament team. And so, you can get some clout, some bragging rights if you can sweep those 2 games. Obviously, one of them you get at home, the other one's a neutral site. Arkansas is also expected to play Baylor, probably in state, probably a home game. That's the way it's been framed. Nothing public on that. And then we know the Houston game in late December, the 20th, in the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. That was recently announced. And so, that's the top of the Big 12. And Baylor, maybe down a little bit, but still one of the top programs in the Big 12. Certainly in recent history, and maybe even next year they'll be maybe better than people think. Don't know if that'll be a ranked team, but when you look at Duke, Louisville, and Houston, that's three teams that are probably ranked, and not only probably ranked, but potentially all three in the top 15, with a couple of those, Houston and Duke, likely being top 10 teams even by the time Arkansas plays them. So we're going to have more. I've got some other schedule stuff to talk about. I'll call it even intel, but we're going to save that for tomorrow's segment. We're going to have a segment well before the Diamond Hogs get around to playing LSU in their first game in the College World Series. We're going to do a segment, and I'm going to bring more to you regarding the schedule. Some interesting stuff that I've put together as we move forward. And, you never know when the full SEC matchups come out. Last year we had them in May already. We'd already had them by now. So that maybe that drops sometime today. Maybe it's next week. But there's other scheduling stuff as it relates to non-conference and the exhibition season that I found very interesting. And again, that'll be saved for tomorrow. All right, let's now remind everybody. And I've been tweeting about this. I mentioned it on yesterday's program that Arkansas, during the second live eval for high school recruits, appreciate what you do. Thank you. That Arkansas would be out and about. There's only one place to be, and that's in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where the prestigious NBA Top 100 camp. There may be over 100. There may be as many as 111 players. I'm not sure, but it's the cream of the crop every year. Go to this camp, because that's what June really is. It's a month for team camps, high school team camps, and for the top level players around the country to be invited to these basically all-star camps. So they're already playing in all-star type leagues when you look at the shoe circuit competitions in May, and then they reboot back in July. So June it's just a little different, but it's kind of the same because like at this event, college coaches can go out and see the top players in the country, the same as they would on the shoe circuit, other than those are that's like league play, and they're playing toward a championship in July. Whereas this is just maybe a 2, 3, sometimes a 4-day camp. And it's, a lot of instruction, a lot of drill work, but there's also 5-on-5, and they just split the campers up onto teams. And so that's what the last 2 days have been. And this camp, the NBPA Top 100 camp's about a 5 or 6 day camp, but the college coaches could only go out for 2 days. And that was Wednesday and Thursday. And so Arkansas had representation there. Chuck Martin, I reported, arrived on the first day. That was Wednesday. And then by Thursday, Arkansas had its entire coaching staff. John Calipari, both associate head coaches, Kenny Payne and Chin Coleman, as well as Martin. And one of the headliners, not only because of how good he is, but the way that he's playing, is Arkansas commitment. Class of 2026, Jashawn J.J. Andrews, rated top 25 by ESPN. I think 247 Sports moved him way up to the 17th best player in their rankings, but they've left him as a 4-star. This is a 5-star guy. I have no idea. And we keep ranting about this. So I'll just say it again. He's a 5-star guy. I'm going to refer to him as a 5-star. That's what he is. But the 6'6" wing at a Little Rock Christian, in front of Arkansas coaches in his second game in the 5-on-5 competition. They're going to play a total of 5 games. The last games are being played today. Coaches are gone. The live period was only for 2 days. It was Wednesday and Thursday, so they got to go. But Andrews with a couple of really big games in front of Arkansas staff. A 32-point game in his second outing of this event. 12 of 20 from the field. He was 2 of 3 from 3. And I think he was either 6 of 6 or 6 of 7 at the foul line. But 32 points, 6 rebounds, a couple of assists, and in front of Arkansas coaches. I've confirmed that they were courtside to see that. And then yesterday, he led his team with 18 points, 8 of 16 from the field. And so he finished with 18 and 5 rebounds. And so a couple of big games there. There was a later game where I have not seen any statistical information come out from yesterday. And again, they play again today. So we'll talk more about this. But really, arguably, JJ's been as good as anybody at this camp. And again, Calipari and the entire coaching staff there to see that. I mentioned a lot of the names that are participating in this a couple of episodes ago. I think it was Wednesday when I talked about this, and that Arkansas would have a presence there. And I speculated Calipari and the whole staff would probably end up being there because they were at NBPA Top 100 camp last year, representing Arkansas. Right? They were already in place when this happened. And so that's in fact what happened. But there are other players. But on JJ's team is a name we've talked a lot about lately. The top center, number one center in the country, according to 247 Sports. Top 25 rated player as well, according to 247. But Erfan Diane, the 7-foot, 285-pound center. And on day one, he blew up in game one with a big 25-point outing. Again, Arkansas coaches there to see him, his teammate in this setting, AJ Andrews, but 25 points, 8 of 12 from the field, 9 of 10 at the foul line. Big game and a big win. And I saw some reports come out that his physicality, just his presence, and obviously the skill that he had to put in 25 points and the work he was doing really stood out. JJ's been on just about every standout list I've seen through the 2-day event. But those guys are playing on the same team, as is another Arkansas recruit from 2026, another top 30 4-star, borderline 5-star, and Abdou Toure, Notre Dame High School in Connecticut. We've talked a lot about him. He's been a priority recruit. He took an unofficial visit to Arkansas last October. He is also on the same team with these guys. So several guys on one team. And so in whichever game you're watching JJ Andrews play, if you're Arkansas's coaching staff, you're also seeing playing in concert with him other guys you're recruiting. So in a sense, we've said Diane is probably one of the top 5 priorities as it stands now for this staff in recruiting in that class. And if you only take 3 or 4 and you want to go get a big man, a 7-footer from the high school class and make your first big, big frontline guy that you got out of the high school ranks since you've been at Arkansas, you're getting a glimpse of what these guys look like together. I think it's really cool that you're seeing a lot of the guys that Arkansas is pursuing teaming up and playing together. So you're not just seeing the individual player, you're seeing how they interact on the court together. That there may be some value in there. It's a small window to look at that. These guys are just kind of thrown together, but you could, if you're recruiting them and you're making them a priority, then you already have a vision in your mind about how they fit your system and how they'd work together. But this is a little practice run, I guess, at determining some of that and what that looks like. And those are just a few of the names. A couple of the really emerging backcourt players, lead guards, which we know that is Calipari's wheelhouse. And all you have to do is look at, let's go ahead and say it out loud, Boogie Fland, followed by Darius Haycup Jr., prize freshman at Arkansas, McDonald's All-American 5-star guys, as lead guards. And so a couple that have been playing really well, and we talk about these guys a lot. Tay Kenny at Overtime Elite, top 20 rated 5-star guard, and plays on the Adidas circuit. And of course, when I was out there in May, interviewed him, put some of his highlights out. The same with Deron Rippey Jr. Out of Blair Academy in New Jersey, another top 20 rated 5-star lead guard. Both of those guys participated just recently in Treviso, Italy, in the Adidas 3SSB Euro Camp, just the Adidas Euro Camp, with a lot of international players in the mix there. And both of them did well in that event, especially Rippey. They're both playing well in this camp. Kenny had a 30-point scoring game in front of Arkansas coaches. Rippey's had his top performances as well since these players have converged in South Carolina for this camp a few days ago. But those are just some of the names. Taj Ariza, who's a 5-star out of St. John Bosco High School out in L.A., is someone we know that Arkansas has been pursuing. And when I interviewed him at the Nike EYBL session, live eval session where Calipari and Shane Coleman were also in May. He said, that he would likely visit Arkansas, that Arkansas was in the mix recruiting him. But big 6'6", 6'7", or maybe even pushing 6'8" at this point. Small forward, wing, did not have a good shooting day, competing against JJ Andrews, Arafan, Diane, and Abdou Toure when his team, Taj Ariza's, squared off here, and Arkansas staff watching, did not have his best performance. 2 of 12 from the field shooting, 4 points. So, not all of it's perfect. And you have to take these performances really good, but especially an off shooting day, with a grain of salt, and understand it's one outing. Doesn't mean that you stop recruiting the guy. But I was really paying attention to that matchup, because when you're looking at guys ranked higher than JJ and he can consistently outperforms them, it's time to take a real good look at, if you're these recruiting services, and making sure you acknowledge the 5-star value here, because that's what he is. I saw some of the highlights of JJ. I mean, getting to the rim, knocking down threes. I mentioned that. Not in high volume, never really in high volume there, but more efficient, and that's been consistent through the spring and summer grassroots play on the EYBL circuit, and now in this all-star setting where you're seeing 5-on-5 competition, and they're charting the stats. But just this little slash and gash, little lefty pull-up game in the mid-range, whether it's transition, getting on the offensive glass. I mean, it's everything. It runs the gamut. And a guy whose motor and his strength and his athleticism, all of that are in the plus to elite categories. And now you're seeing him really add the skills in different pockets of the court offensively. And then on defensively, he's just constantly engaged and a menace and locked in and using his gifts to make a difference on that end. And so everything's really coming together for JJ in terms of screaming 5-star. So there we go. Jalen Montnati, another wing out of Wasso, another 5-star in the class of 2026, also taking part in this camp. Beckham Black also taking part and has had some good stats in some of the 5-on-5 games. So Arkansas and Calipari, this was a true, the shoe circuits sessions are some evaluation. A lot of that's about being seen. This probably a little more eval opportunity, because there's not as much going on. It's fewer players, and it's kind of culled down to the even more top level guys. And so you're able to really focus more, and you have your entire staff in one place. And so I know there's at least a handful to 8 players that Arkansas is also monitoring that are playing in this event. And at some point, I hope to be able to share those names. So I've been asked to, not for now. So this was a big second live eval opportunity for Arkansas's coaching staff, of which I'm sure they're making the most of. Again, Calipari is the best in high school recruiting that's ever lived, in my opinion. That's not a stretch to say that. And this is part of that. This is one of these things that bakes into what his process is and what comes next. Now, there'll be multiple live eval sessions in July. There may be a couple here and also still in. It won't be in the same light as what they just had, the NBPA Top 100 camp, or what goes on in July when it's back to the shoe circuit events. So this was a big one with a couple of more big ones to come. 2 out of the way, live evals, at least 2 more to come that matter. All right, this is Kevin McPherson, HogvilleNET YouTube Live, almost 35 minutes in. I'm going to sign off and thank you for being here. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't already. That helps us out. Look, a reminder, tomorrow we're going on and we're going to talk more about non-con stuff, exhibition season, some interesting stuff I got there. We'll have more information about players. Hopefully more will be learned between now and then about Egor Ryzhov and maybe some of these other names or new ones as things might turn out. But until next time, thanks for being here. We appreciate all of you. If we get a Ryzhov commitment today, I'm liable to come back on live. If not, it probably will be tomorrow before you see me again. But until then, thanks for being here. See you soon.